So nowadays, there seems to be a lot of people who work in the government who have no idea that they took an oath to protect the Constitution. And that includes their own, meaning you as a person in the government, whether you're a police officer, ATF agent, the president, a judge, a probation officer, you are required to protect the Constitution like it's your son. Pretty simple. It should be the highest thing on the totem pole as far as what you do in your job. But for some reason, some of these people just don't understand that. And today we have a circumstance that shows just that. There was a guy who was simply interested in the manufacturing or engineering of firearms. In fact, he would sit there and build them. It was a hobby of his. It would be the same as if you have a hobby working on vehicles, if you have a hobby painting, playing piano, playing the guitar, gardening, literally anything. Anyways, somehow he was raided because, my God, in New York, if you create something, if you have a hobby, they're gonna come and they're gonna take you down because that's not allowed. I mean, don't you know that America is more along the lines of a country that fully embraces communism than the other way? If you don't know that, I recommend you do some research. Have a listen.
So some time ago, I became interested in gunsmithing. Ever since I was a kid, I really, like most kind of red-blooded American kids, I was interested in guns and, tanks and fighter planes and because it was cool, And so, but maybe 3-4 years ago, maybe I became really interested in gunsmithing. And I thought this would be a really cool thing to do. In April of 2022, a joint SWAT ATF task force raided my house, like broke down my door and everything. And it was. I remember it was like April 6th, was it? Yeah. And I'd gone to bed listening to an audiobook, woke up and I heard voices that were not the audiobook, and then I heard a bang. And then I heard, where are my police? Don't worry. And now I'm in the position of having to fight for my freedom because, according to the state of New York, the Constitution does not matter, and the Bruin ruling does not matter.
So this guy was just having fun. He wasn't selling these items, even though I don't consider that to be a major moral issue. But he got raided, and a judge in New York, and let me make sure I get her name right because nobody that I have seen has been able to pronounce it. And I gotta be honest with you, it sounds like it came straight out of a Star Wars movie, even though I am not educated on Star Wars. This judge's name is Judge Abina Darka. I don't know. So, one of a judge's responsibilities is to be consistent and to provide justice for a city, a population, whatever it may be. A couple of months ago, a prosecutor asked this judge for a $30,000 bail for an accused gunpoint robber, meaning this person went up to another person, held them at gunpoint, and tried to rob them. And Judge Abina Darke did not provide a bond, did not provide a bail. She let him go. But in this particular case, she sentenced a man who simply had a hobby with firearms to over a decade in prison. Now, I'm going to read exactly what she said in court because it's astonishing. It's treason, and that is not the wrong use of that word. And it is 100% illegal by law. So the sheriff, in whatever district she is in, needs to go to the courthouse and they need to arrest her. Allow me to read. She stated right before she sentenced this man to over a decade in prison, the Second Amendment does not exist here. Do not bring the Second Amendment into this courtroom. It doesn't exist here. You can't argue the Second Amendment. This is New York. You must really be studying Joe Biden's manuscripts from his speeches. Oh, let's ban assault weapons, even though they count for 0.0000001% of all the crimes.
Second Amendment's not absolute.
Also, just so y'all know, we revamped our merch. This pretty much says it. I'm non-binary. Oh, you're non-binary? Oh, I'm non-binary. So thank you so much. So this is an example of a judge who is tyrannical. A judge who simply thinks that just because they're a judge, they can change the Constitution or they can remove things from the Constitution. But let me remind you, Judge, you took an oath to protect the Constitution, which means you took an oath to protect people's Second Amendment rights. But here you are in court saying the Second Amendment doesn't exist here. That's treason. Let me read the criminal code that you should be arrested for. This provision makes it a crime for someone acting under color of law to willfully deprive a person of a right or privilege protected by the Constitution or laws of the United States. What does that mean? That means by you simply stating that someone's constitutional rights do not exist in a court of law. That's treason. You should be arrested and you should be charged. This isn't a game. Do you think this is a game, Judge Star Wars name? Oh, the Second Amendment doesn't exist here. How do you figure that? Is the courtroom your property? Is it? Or is it the people's property? You think you can just sit there and rewrite the Constitution or exclude things just because you're a judge? Also, there's a part that you said in this that's really interesting. Do not bring the Second Amendment into my courtroom. Are you thinking that he brought a gun into your courtroom, or is simply the argument that he can participate in one of his constitutional rights not allowed in your courtroom? Because if I was an attorney, I would argue that the judge is incompetent and impartial. And that's what a judge needs to be. They need to be a competent human being and they need to be impartial, and their rulings need to be based on what people's constitutional rights grant them. I mean, what about any other case that goes into this courtroom now that has to do with a gun? The Second Amendment doesn't apply to your courtroom. What a joke. So let me go on record by saying that this woman has committed treason. This woman needs to be arrested, or at the bare minimum, she needs to be fired and never hold a public office again. Not even be a public librarian. We don't want people like this in any position in our government.